Greetings, gamers. We're going to try this again. Unfortunately, I didn't hit record, so I've babbled out my Nexus for a little bit and not gotten anything useful out of it. So, silly me, my fault. Entirely. I just forgot to look for the little clock up in the corner that shows me that it's running. Now, I have come to you, YouTube, to help me solve a dilemma. My Wednesday night game group is about to end our several month-long Pathfinder game temporarily. We're taking a break for a while so the GM can recharge his batteries, so to speak. He's quite busy with other things and he wants to take a break, and that's fine. Now, this is where it comes in that I need your help. I don't know what I'm going to run. I have ideas. I gave the players a whole list of campaign ideas, which I thought they might be interested in. They chose one, but that's not necessarily the one I think they will have the most fun with. So I'm thinking of offering them a different one, but I have to find a system for it. Now, this is why it comes into an impasse in my head, because there are so many different games that can do the idea and do the idea justice, but finding the optimal fit is the issue. And at the moment, I can't necessarily go out and buy a dozen new games to read them, to compare them, and see if any of them are even more suitable. Now, it can't be D&D or Pathfinder, at least current iterations of D&D or Pathfinder, because I don't care for those systems myself. I'm enjoying the Pathfinder game I am in quite a bit, and it is, for what it is, it's been quite fun, but it's a little more combat focused than I usually prefer. The campaign I'm going to be running is going to have some combat focus in it, but it's going to be a little more balanced with some investigation and thought, and exploration is going to be a heavy part of the game. Now, the premise of the campaign I want to run is that a powerful wizard created a magical sword because this great warrior asked him for something that would live up to his glory. He gave him the sword Morale, which is this big, epic, scary-looking black sword. Of course it has to be black, because it's a soul-drinking sword. Now, the sword eventually drove the warrior mad, and he slaughtered people left and right in huge massacres. And it gives him power, as it kills the souls, it gives him some power to keep going. Most of the soul's power, it feeds back to the sword's creator, the wizard. And he used that to conquer the world. And that's where the player characters come in. See, they're dead. They were killed, which is not an unusual start for role-playing games. I've used it before, but differently. This time, they're dead and killed and sucked into the sword. Due to unfortunate, or in their case, fortunate circumstances, the sword did not devour their souls or feed them on to its creator. Instead, they just got trapped in sort of a limbo, where they didn't exactly know where they were, didn't age, didn't die, didn't really exist per se. Now, this becomes a issue because magic that lets you resurrect the dead is incredibly rare in this setting. And because of that, their resurrection is going to be one of the few times they ever see it in the game. Now, the problem I'm hitting is there are so many tabletop role-playing games with so many different styles of play. A bulk of them do fantasy and do fantasy well. I have my own High Valor game, but it's aimed a little more at Dark Age fantasy role-playing. And that it's not perfect. I could adapt it to do this setting, but the game is going to be centered around the fact that the sword was killing people for centuries. And the wielder will stay alive for those centuries to kill more and more people. So I have a centaur from a culture that was very Roman, and they were a Roman legionnaire or a peltast or whatever, and on up to Japanese imperial samurai and ninja foxfolk person, and things in between. I've got stuff from very primitive ages, barbarians, not necessarily too primitive, Viking age or so, on up to early Renaissance fencer type person. And that is, of course, I need a game that can do multiple races, can do them in an interesting way, can do multiple professions. It does not have to be a class-based system. In fact, my preference would be for a system that allows me to build a character that kind of resembles a class, but is not necessarily a class-based system. And it has to be a game either I own or can acquire for free or cheaply. Now, I have pretty much ditched D&D, AD&D, or Pathfinder because those are not my favorite. Basic D&D is my favorite. The Encyclopedia is one of the best books ever made for D&D, and so I could use that game if possible. I might use 2nd edition D&D. It's questionable. I don't particularly like the way they do ninjas. I think ninjas should have just been a kit for the rogue class, the thief class, but it's not necessarily perfect. I could use Dungeon World, which I'm quite enamored with at the moment, but I haven't played more than one game of Dungeon World yet. I don't have a very strong grounding in the system to start to want to hack together a samurai class that is different enough from a paladin so that if I have a paladin and a samurai in the same party, they don't appear to be mimicking each other, especially since Dungeon World wants you to have, everybody has a unique class, an individual class, until I start killing off player characters. Now, with that said, I have considered True 20, which is a class-based system I enjoy, although not quite sure how I would write up the individual sort of focused kit type elements to say the warrior to be a samurai or be a paladin, or the wizard to be something like a Shugenja, or whatever. I have Dragonlance Saga, which is card powered, which I really love. That I can build to fit, even though it is classless. I can, tweak the attributes and everything so that everybody fits a specific kind of spotlight, which is what I'm aiming for, is a slightly different spotlight for every character. I could use my own High Valor, but as I said, it's not perfect. I could use Warrior, Rogue, and Mage. I could use GURPS, but I'm not really wanting to put that much effort into a game. Mind you, GURPS is probably one of the better systems. It's just not one that I really want to use or spend that much time in, because I'm supposed to be starting this game up in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. Now, I've got a lot of game systems I could try, and I would be willing to download a free or fairly cheap available game system that could do something. I've got quite a few, and I never mind getting a new game if I can afford it. But right now I'm fairly broke because I'm a game designer, so I don't have a lot of money, and I don't charge a lot for my games either. If I charged the amount of work that went into my tabletop games, they'd probably be $50 books, even with their black and white art. And I might have a little more money, but I probably wouldn't have as many people playing my games, and I prefer more people playing than making myself a significant living or wealth. Not that this hobby will ever give me any wealth unless someday somebody licenses it for a video game or something, a movie, which is unlikely. So I am turning to you, YouTube, and anybody who subscribes or watches this or gets an idea, that in the next few weeks, if you can, give me a suggestion for a game that might do what I suggested, the campaign. It needs to have exploration elements. It needs to have strong fantasy elements of good against evil as potential. It doesn't have to be a game that has morality, but it does need one where a battle between good and evil is possible. So one that doesn't necessarily have some sort of cosmology that forces a certain kind of play into it. I don't care if it's old school rules. I don't, D&D like, as long as it's different enough from AD&D or D&D 3rd edition, preferably. I don't care if it's a story game, so long as it's something focused like Dungeon World, something that is kind of aimed at doing what I'm looking for. And I kind of want the game to last at least a year, maybe a year and a half for campaign play. I have a beginning, a middle, and end. So I don't want something that takes forever to level up the characters. No 20 levels to go fight the big bad. I want, maybe 10 at most, probably 6 or 7, around that, because I don't like games that have to level and level and level and level and level to get your character functional. I like characters that start out fairly competent and continue to grow in competency or more focused in their competences. Anyway, that's where I'm at. If anybody wants to help, I'm going to put this on YouTube, and I'm going to share it on the Google Plus page, so just let me know. And thank you for your assistance in helping me solve this dilemma.